Joining us today on the series is Chris Halward, a seasoned sourcing leader and also an accredited leadership coach who has worked across the globe leading transformation initiatives. With a track record also of working within the insurance sector, Chris has played a key role in establishing contact and service centres and also has helped shape outsourcing training for the industry through his work with the likes of the Global Sourcing Association. So I met Chris many years ago at a sourcing event, and oh, how the world has changed since then. And something we'll no doubt dig into. So, Chris, great to have you today. Maybe going to start with your own intro and a little bit about kind of how you help clients.
Yeah, great. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast, Danny. It's great to see you again. It's been a while since we've been in touch, actually. So I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was a fair few years. So
Yeah, maybe 10. I was maybe, yeah,
10,
maybe
God, 10
10.
years.
That's worrying. We'll say it's fewer.
Yeah. I always cringe a little to be called a seasoned consultant, but I guess I have to admit that I probably am. Um, I'm at that point in my career. I think it's really exciting because I do a few different things. So I'm a consultant. I'm a director at a small consultancy firm called Ascea. And the focus of Ascea is really around offering sourcing advice, particularly around the selection of suppliers. Mm. We also offer some advice around change programs. Data is something that we are asked to chip in and help people around data. And of course, I'm sure we'll touch on data as we go through this conversation. It seems to be a word that you can never really avoid in this day and age. We also have some expertise around testing as well, which is quite an interesting one because it's often something that does get perhaps not forgotten, but it's not given the importance that it really deserves. So there's a whole load of stuff around that sourcing consultancy, but I'm also fortunate to be able to work with people on a coaching front, and I have to admit sometimes I feel a little embarrassed that I feel I get at least as much and sometimes more out of the coaching sessions than the candidates the clients themselves, because I'm working with more senior people. And they come to me and they use it as a space. It's a safe space, if you like. But it's a space where they can tell me what they really think, if you like, what's really keeping them up at night, mm-hmm. the things that they're really concerned about. And so I think you get a privileged insight into what's going on. And of course, at the moment, AI is something that people they talk about and worry about as well, because it's, what the hell is all this about? I'm not a technology person. Interestingly, a lot of the people that I talk to, they might work within the technology sector. They might have a job that's even, technology orientated. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily see themselves as, in quotes, techies. They have a knowledge of the sector, mm-hmm. but they've not necessarily got that detailed technical knowledge. And that can mean that the world becomes a bit of a scary place. You're making decisions around things that you're not entirely sort of comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So those are the two main aims, main activities. And I'm also associated with the Global Sourcing Association, which again allows me just to connect with lots of people from lots of different industries. Financial services for sure, but all sorts of other industries as well. So you get this kind of broad appreciation of what's going on, mm-hmm. and are left in no doubt that the world is a really complicated place now, fast moving, massively complicated, and I think as people involved in it need to just kind of take a breath and think, don't be worried that you're confused. Mm-hmm. Everybody's.
Well, everyone is confused. Some kind of paint the picture that they may be less confused than others, but I think confusion's a stable fact. So actually, maybe the benefit of, I suppose, kind of yourself, we've got the coaching perspective, and we've also got the sourcing perspective. So you can pick either side or
Yeah,
both to answer. But in the way in which people are kind of coming to you and you're working with clients, kind of in the context of AI, and we'll keep it to regulated industries. I mean,
yeah.
are you noticing kind of a change in what they're leaning on you for, or what they're wanting to explore within this safe space as you framed it?
Yeah, it's good. It's good, really good question, Danny, because it's for me, I think that the difference is that in the past, perhaps it was all about implementation.
Hmm.
It was, that was really the focus of most people's requirements. Now, I think there's more of a sense of um, perhaps we need to dig into what the vision of this thing needs to be, what our vision for AI needs to be. We need to understand it in a broader sense. We need to think perhaps much more about the underlying, the core operating model, because I think people are recognizing that this is a real point of inflection. The
Hmm.
world really is going to change. And those of us who've been around for a while, I've been around for, as long as most. And we've seen things before. Um, I was involved a lot in the call center revolution, 1990s, really. People now don't quite realise that there was a time when we didn't really have call centres. You phoned up an organisation and you didn't phone into a big, factory
Hmm.
of call handlers. Just didn't. But in the 1990s, everybody started setting them up. When we got to the 2000s, we really got into this kind of outsourcing, offshoring revolution. Same sort of thing. There's massive changes. But having seen those, I don't think those are anything like the change that is going to take place with AI. And those two things were huge. But AI, completely different. So I think clients are really looking to try to get some help and support around what does our business look like.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, and actually, on some of the people that we spoke to, kind of on the series, it's like, what's the initial stepping off point? And it's interesting your point about implementation, because um, it's all too easy now. I mean, there's lots of free tools out there that you can kind of just go start using. And I suppose if you're doing that without knowing the direction and the end goal in mind, whether it's AI or anything else, it kind of just falls into the technical debt thing. This then becomes a dependency within your business, but because you've approached it in a way that maybe is less strategic, actually you're going to have more baggage within your organization to then deal with.
I think that's such an important observation. Um, it feels to me, and again, there are lessons to be learned from those examples I gave of other revolutions in the past, the call centers and outsourcing.
Hmm.
Um, Somebody I was talking to fairly recently said there's a bit of executive coming along to their managers and saying, I've heard this AI thing's really important. We've got a budget. Why don't you go and do a bit of AI? We need to get £30 million of savings before the end of the year. Off you go. Um, what I remember is people um, talking around outsourcing in the same way. They would they would tell me stories. I've said it firsthand as well, where a director would come along and say, "This outsourcing thing really important. We've got to get into it. Can you go and outsource something?" What do you want me to outsource? Doesn't matter. Just outsource something. We've got to get into this. And call centers were a bit the same. Everybody wanted a call center.
Hmm.
And we think about what we want the call center for, what we are going to, why outsourcing is going to help. And nowadays, how is AI going to progress our business towards the goals that we've set.
Mm-hmm.
That's the critical thing, isn't it? Surely.
And what's you've, and I think this is probably falls into the sourcing play, but once someone has done some of the work on their strategy and they kind of know the North Star analogy of where they want to go to, you seen any trends or consistencies in their drivers? Is it about efficiency? Is it about taking risk out of the business, revenue opportunities? I mean, are you seeing, may not, but I mean, are you seeing kind of any themes around why people are exploring technology, AI in this way?
You know, it feels to me as though whatever the revolution is, the first thing people are concerned about is this going to be a way in which I can do what I do it for less money?
Mm-hmm.
You know, can I reduce cost? You know, I've spent 20 years talking to people about outsourcing and saying, you know, the thing about outsourcing is it's not just about saving cost. And if you focus only on saving cost, the chances are you're going to enter into arrangements that are not going to deliver the value to your business that your business requires. Mm-hmm. So you need to be thinking more broadly. Well, people will nod and they'll say, yeah, absolutely right, Chris. Yeah, absolutely right. But we still need to think about cost, don't we?
Yeah.
And, you know, so you have to accept that there is a huge cost driver. Where I think, though, those organizations that end up being the real leaders in their markets end up going with their thinking is to say, yeah, it's a cost. There's a cost driver there. But there's also a real opportunity to do some really clever things around, you know, how we manage risk. There's some really clever things that we can do around how we can improve the quality of service. There's some really clever things that we can do around how we can improve the quality of the jobs that we are providing to the people that work for us. Mm-hmm. A whole load of things. And I think people are really starting to get into all of those ideas, and they are drivers along with cost.
Mm-hmm. So an off-topic question, but kind of going from what you said there. So you talk about the evolution of kind of the contact centers and then outsourcing. I suppose, are there any similarities to be drawn between how an organization perhaps readies themselves for outsourcing compared to maybe taking digital labor into their business?
Yeah, huge. I mean, it's you know, what happens is that an organization at the top will see that there's an opportunity, and so they'll look to really pursue that opportunity with enthusiasm. And those people who are enthusiastic about change will, of course, be really keen to get on board. Quite often, the people at the top of the organization can be people who are really quite keen on change, mm-hmm. and so are driving things forward. The problems that we start to face, though, the challenges that we face, is in bringing everybody along on that journey. And one of the real difficulties that we have with AI is that it is so all-encompassing. When I think back to outsourcing, mm-hmm. it would often be something that, you know, would impact on a particular part of the organization. We wouldn't be outsourcing all of the organization. We'd outsource a part of it. So maybe HR would be outsourced. Maybe finance and accounting would be outsourced. And that's fine. We could manage that. It's a challenge for those people in HR and in finance and accounting, but broadly speaking, we're looking at it as a bite-sized chunk of change. The problem that I think we're faced with at the moment is that AI is going to impact on every single part of the organization. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity for every single part of the organization. Every single job, literally every single job, can be impacted, I would say improved, by using AI.
Mm.
We're assuming that all of those job holders are going to say, great. I suspect that there's an awful lot of them that think, what?
Yeah, yeah.
How is this going to impact me, my job prospects? Some of us like to learn new things. A lot of people, not so much. They just like to do the job that they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that I think we really do need to take into account. So that plays to that whole kind of change management thing. And again, what we've discovered, and it happens even now, and I talk to a lot of the big service providers who are routinely introducing new outsourcing arrangements into their clients. And they say consistently, all of them say consistently, change management is something that's never done well.
Yeah.
Almost never done well. Always underinvested. Always the thing that we choose to undervalue. And I think it's a mistake. It was a mistake with outsourcing arrangements. It continues to be a mistake with outsourcing arrangements. Huge mistake if you're changing your business using AI, as you absolutely must do, I think.
Yeah, and quite interesting about this whole, it's not departmental focus compared to outsourcing, perhaps. So, are you maybe with a regulated industry perspective? How are you seeing it being owned within the organisation? So, you kind of given the example of an MD or a director tap someone on the shoulder and say, "We should do some AI," and I think we both agree that's the wrong way. But in the way in which it works well, how are you seeing? And we're gonna assume there's a strategy that's been set, but from an operational execution perspective, how are you seeing it being owned in the businesses that you work with?
Yeah, it feels to me as though it's interesting because this what I see quite a lot in the industry is a focus on GBS organizations, global business services. And global business services, I think, has been often a misunderstood activity. For those people that are not overly conversant with GBS, the notion of global business services is that it is a way in which you can look at the way that your business sources services and make choices about whether you're going to use third parties or whether you're going to develop your own in-house capability. And I think what organizations need to do is to perhaps think really carefully about the value of establishing that global business services function, because the choices that are now having to be made are entirely fundamental to the success of the business going forward. So you need to be choosing whether, in fact, you need to have, for a particular service, a third-party support, or whether you feel as though there is capability within the organisation. And indeed, you need to manage how that might change over time. So I think there's a lot of organisations that are quite keen on the idea that we need support in the early stages of AI, but surely there is an opportunity to enable us to build our own in-house capability. Now that, I think, creates some real challenges for the provider community, because when you start to think about that and project it logically, then you start to wonder, well, what is it that this third party is going to then offer when they've helped the organisation to become capable in AI? I think, though, this is the way organisations at the moment will be thinking. Come along, help us to do this, but make sure that you're leaving behind the tools and the capability.
Good. So one of my kind of parting questions, actually, we've probably covered on a few of them already, but lessons learned and kind of practical applications for success. I mean, any kind of closing sound bites again of what you're seeing working well, and even sprinkling the this definitely doesn't work. And again, we've already kind of covered some of those as well. But yeah, kind of parting thoughts from you that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing I think for me is that AI is seen as a strategic opportunity, and it needs to have that high level support. Those people in senior positions in organizations really do need to be educating themselves around what AI is all about. I think it's not about educating yourself around the technicalities of it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us will never even get close to understanding how all of this stuff actually works from a technical front. We do need, though, to understand as senior people in organizations what the potential capabilities of this might be, what the impact might be. And in regulated industries, we absolutely need to see AI as something which is going to help us to be compliant within that regulated framework. But I think certainly in the next few years, that's going to be a competitive advantage for those organizations that can see ways in which they can demonstrate how AI is being used in an ethical way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all of a sudden, people who are hard-nosed commercial operators find themselves having to delve into some ethics. My first degree was in philosophy, so it was something that I remember something about all those years ago. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be as important as I think it's going to become. So thinking about compliance in a very different way. Compliance is going to, in the past, I think compliance has been simply something that everybody had to do. Now, I think people can see this as being a way in which we can actually engineer a competitive advantage by being compliant in a more ethical manner.
Good. Well, that's probably one of the best closing statements then, Chris. So, I mean, been great to be able to kind of draw these lines between sourcing and then actually how this next evolution, if we kind of continue with that, actually kind of has synergies and can actually benefit from some of the hard work that's been done in sourcing previously to give AI a greater chance of success. So,
yeah, for sure. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great to have you on.
Grand.
Bye.
Thanks, Danny.